Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Roxy Darling and here I post videos of things that I create. In this video I will be sculpting an eye on a wooden plaque. I have a quote taped to my refrigerator that says, "What you fear most is what you need to do," something like that, but you get the gist. And as an artist, I've been scared to sculpt and paint faces, so I'm dipping my toe in the water and sculpting an eye. With this sculpt, I'll be using a wooden plaque, super Sculpey, acrylic paint, and powdered pigments. I'm gonna leave a list of the materials I used for this project in the description down below. So far, you've seen me map out on tracing paper the area I want to cover with polymer clay. Here, I'm cutting out the clay using the template that I just made. I previously used a pasta roller to evenly flatten out the clay, and I use a blade to cut the shape out. Once the shape is cut out, I will be using liquid Sculpey to adhere the clay to the plaque. So right now I am using liquid Sculpey as my adhesive, and I'm using a lot, so I'm just pouring it out of the bottle. And to be honest, the bottle's pretty old, and I'm just gonna eke out the rest of it that's in there because I've got a new bottle of Sculpey stuff waiting to be used. I love new art supplies. It's one of my joys. Ooh, and cake decorating. I feel like I'm living out my cake decorating fantasies at this moment. Once I get it all evenly coated, I use a roller to roll out any bubbles that are underneath the clay or in between the clay and the plaque. And please don't use your fingers to smear out the Sculpey softener. Use your gloves. My gloves are literally right next to me, and my impulsivity forgot to use them. So yeah, clay softener to smooth out any of those edges, and now I'm starting the eyeball with an actual ball of clay that I cut in half. And right now I'm just kind of smoothing out any lumps and bumps before I use my new bottle of liquid Sculpey to adhere it to the plaque. I use sheets of rolled out Sculpey to create the upper and lower eyelids. And then once they're on there, I just kind of press out any air and start forming them to look as close to an eye with upper and lower lids as possible. I end up doing 2 layers of sheeting because the first layer ended up looking kind of like a frog eye, and so I used 2, and now I'm just using a standard sculpting tool to smooth out any areas and just add some definition where I think it needs to go before I pop it in the oven and bake it. Here I'm using 350 to 400 grit sanding paper wrapped around a little squishy foam block that I cut out. It's just easier on my hands. Yeah, and I'm just sanding it down till it feels pretty smooth. And now I'm starting the details that are going to be roses. I'm actually going to make 2 different kinds of flowers, but here you're going to see me beginning the petals for the rose. I've made roses in past videos, but I'll just go ahead and give you another tutorial in case you missed any of those videos. I start off by making the rose bud with putting a teardrop shaped piece of clay on a sewing pin. I use a sewing pin because it helps hold the clay, and I can stab the pin into the little piece of styrofoam to hold it up while I press the little balls of clay I made into petals. So I started by wrapping a few of the little petals around the teardrop shape, and just to create the center of the rose. Now I'm going to start bringing the petals out, and I just press the part of it onto the clay, and then I leave half of it open so I can overlap each petal, if that makes sense. I continue this process of overlapping the petals until I get the size that I would like. And as I get further away from the center, I allow the petals to fold outward ever so slightly. Once I get the shape and size that I want, I go around to each petal and kind of press and tuck under the ends of the petals so they look more realistic. And before I adhere the clay to the plaque, I'm going to cut the bottom off so it sits flush to the piece rather than sticking up. And here is my unnecessary use of slow-mo to show you the rose that I made. Now to go on to the next flower. I don't know what kind of flower this is, but it uses these little cake decorating tools, and they kind of look like daisies, and I have them in multiple sizes. I think 4 different sizes, but I'm just using the first and second smallest shapes. So I cut out a bunch of the smaller ones and now to the second largest size. And I'm just gonna make a whole stack of them because I think I end up making around 9 or 10 of these particular flower. Like the rose, this flower also starts off with a base shape, and this shape is a small sphere or little ball, whatever you like. And I take the smallest of the flowers and I smoosh it out a little bit, and then I curve it almost all the way around the ball. And the second one I curve and I just leave an essence of space between the first and second one. I think I end up using 3 of these small flower sizes and then 2 of the larger size ones. And now to make some decorative trim, I'm going to make a rope style trim around the piece of polymer clay that I've adhered to the plaque. I could use a clay extruder if I wanted to get these little snaky things perfect, but I'm not going for perfect here. I'm going for good enough. So I'm just going to roll the ends in opposite directions and the clay will twist on itself, and then I use my fingers to just kind of even out the twists. I'm not using the whole piece. I'm going to be using sections of the rope. Alright, so after I measure out the section, I'm just going to cut the ends off that I'm not going to be using, and then I'm going to be using liquid Sculpey to adhere the rope to the edge. And at this point you might be wondering why I am leaving little gaps in between each of these little sections. And that's because I'm going to be covering those gaps up with some polymer clay leaves. Okay, so this is fresh out of the oven, and I am realizing at this point I need to make more flowers, so yes, thank you, the magic of editing. So now to begin painting the first layer of paint. As you will see, this layer of paint is thin. I thinned out the paint. It's acrylic paint, matte black by, I forget the name brand. I'll leave it in the description below. Anywho, the matte black paint is thinned out about 50-50 paint and water. I do this because there's a lot of nooks and crannies to get into, and it just seemed easier and less gloopy to use thinned out paint to get into those small spaces. And this is me adding the second coat of paint. After the base layer of black is painted, I do take a picture of it to use in Procreate to kind of sketch out the design I'm going to do. And then after that, I go in with some matte acrylic white paint to paint the eyeball. And this is kind of what I'm going for. I did not paint the iris. I didn't do that. I just used that and this as inspiration. I got them from Pinterest, and thank you Motive Cosmetics for the inspiration. So I'm using the Motives Cosmetics step-by-step reference image to kind of go by as my guide with my powdered pigments, and I'm just realizing it's just going to take way too many coats. And so I just decided to scratch that and go in with matte acrylics to get down my base colors. And then later on, I will go over that with the powdered pigments to soften all the edges. So I continue painting until I get the base layer looking like I want with acrylics, and once those dry, I use Mr. Super Clear Spray Varnish. It's matte, so it can prep the area to let the powder pigments kind of stick to. I'm using Pearl X powder pigments here, and I'm adding them kind of pressing them into the area and then blending them out. After I finish with the powder pigments, I hit it with 2 more layers of Mr. Super Clear, and then I start sketching in the iris. I'm nervous right now. I really am. And I'm also leaned over to the side because I am using a new tripod because, well, it's not a new tripod. My old table clamp overhead broke. So I give up on leaning over to the side. You can see the tripod to my right. It was just making everything wonky because I couldn't see properly. So I give that up and just lay it on my lap. So here I'm going in with a watered down black to just establish where the pupil will be, and then I'm going in with my medium shade of blue to start just mapping out the area where the iris is. After I lay down the area where the base layer of blue is going to be, I go in with a darker shade of blue to lay out the area where the iris gets darker. The iris gets darker at the edges and closest to the pupil. Because of the shape of the eyelid, there's a shadow that casts down onto the iris, so I am painting that with the darker blue at the moment. And once I paint that shadow down, I'll go in with a lighter shade of blue to indicate areas where light is hitting the eye. Once the base layer is down, I start putting in the details. I start with the darkest color of blue, adding the lines in the iris, and then I'll go to medium, and then I'll go to the lightest shades. The blue is going to be on the outside and the inside towards the iris. The medium blue will be towards the center, and then the highlights will be in the center, but just in a more scattered out pattern. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm doing things that I fear, and painting faces and human stuff is kind of scary for me, and I'm at the detail part and I'm not wanting to ruin everything that I just did. And I think my cat's picking up on my stress and my intense concentration, and so she pops into the picture. And I will try to ignore her for the most part, but I do end up having to abandon my project and shower her with lots of love and attention. After hugs and pets were distributed, I came back to the piece to add the highlights. This is the part that adds the realism to the eye, or basically brings the eye to life. So I was wrong, more love was needed, so she will be hanging out on my lap while I tie in colors from the eyeshadow area. So right here I'm adding a little bit of lavender just for an extra splash of color. Speaking of color, I am now going to go in and add a graphic eyeliner line with some mint green acrylic, and before I go back in and add some black eyeliner. But yeah, I am going to add a really extra large wing to this eyeliner because that's what I prefer, and I'm being inspired by Rainbow High's Zoe Electra. If you know who she is, you know who she is. If you don't worry about it. Okay, so now's the time to start putting on the black eyeliner, and I wear liquid eyeliner pretty much every day. I am totally comfortable with whipping out a winged line in a heartbeat on my own face, but doing another person's face, or like a piece of sculpture in front of me, that's a whole different story. My palms are sweaty, my hands are shaking. I'm noticing about right now there's a piece of hair that's sticking out of the side of the paintbrush that I'm trying to ignore. And I'm telling myself right now just to keep pushing through, even though my line is wobbly. Just keep going, girl. So, okay, I had to do that off camera. I just couldn't do it. And I had to switch brushes. Because look how pretty this brush is. And it's all perfect. There's no wonky hairs sticking out the sides. Not to mention, my nails and brush match perfectly, and I didn't even plan that. So now I'm going in and I'm adding some detail eyelashes, once again inspired by Zoe Electra. Thank you, my little alien muse. So at this point, I realized that once this paint dries, my eyelashes will disappear from the background or into the background. So I forge ahead with some little decorative dots and formulate a plan to make the eyelashes pop. And what I decided on is later I will add some gloss Mod Podge to the eyeliner and just the black eyeliner and the eyelashes so they pop out from the background. Now I'm starting to add a little sparkle detail because I decided this was going to have a space galaxy eye of intuition theme because I can. And I am just going to use my dotting tool to start adding little bits of eye detail, and then I go in around the edges of the piece to start indicating stars, stardust kind of stuff. And I start off with the mint color, and then I start bringing in some other colors from the eyeshadow area. So I think I use mint, blue, and purple for my Galaxy Stardust jazz. Once that's dry, it's time to go in and gloss up the eyeball to make it more realistic. And you just squeeze a little bit, but my hand twitched and I squeezed out more than I expected. So now I gotta go in and smear it all around and clean up the extra UV resin that squeezed out of the bottle. I use a Q-tip to clean up old twitchy magoo hand stuff, and once that's clean, I'm gonna hit it with some UV resin and wrap up this piece off camera, and I will see you at final looks. Look how cool that is. It's like space magic. So as you can see off camera, I added some fake eyelashes, glossed up that eyeliner, and added some flat back crystals for some extra sparkle. And it's done. What do you think? I'm pretty pleased with it, especially that highlighter where the cheek should be in the center of the corner of the eye. I love it. So please leave a comment down below about your thoughts, and if you like it, hit the like button. If you want to see more of what I do, hit the subscribe button and notification bell down below. And yeah, if you made it this far, I appreciate you and thank you. Bye-bye.